How is it that you deal with clients asking for work outside the agreed statement of work? Hi guys, my name is Deepak Shukla, founder at the Pearl Lemon Group. We're a business growth and development agency based in the UK, USA, as well as serving clients worldwide. And here today, in day number 57, we're here to talk about scope creep and what you should do about it. But before we get into it, if you need any support with your communication or client relationship management, please do reach out to us. And before we get into it, also, feel free to click the link in the description below to get access to 7 additional strategies not shared in this training. So look, fundamentally, you're from time to time going to get clients who ask for stuff. To be honest with you, all clients will ask for stuff, and some of that stuff will not be inside the agreed scope. So there's a couple of things to think about when it comes to this. Now, let's do our wonderful thing. So the first thing is just make a judgment call. So making a judgment call is what you can choose to just do and ignore, and then not ignore and not do. Okay, so make a judgment call. So what can you do that will help the client that isn't onerous that you could do as a favor, if you will, to a degree? But at some level, there needs to be a judgment call that this is outside the scope of work and it's just not profitable or reasonable that you get it done. Where that line is, there's a couple of ways to figure it out. Number one, I would say ask, someone who's senior to yourself to see where that line is based upon their experience. So that's just the first thing. The second thing is, I mean, sometimes your common sense will tell you, okay? And the way to think about it is ask the operations team how much additional work this is. So if they say, oh, this will take me 2 seconds, not a problem. If they say this is going to take me hours, problem. So that's a different way to also consider it. So that's just the second thing to consider. The third thing to consider is and again, you might not know this, but it's thinking about the profitability of the campaign. And the way that you might think about that is finding out how much you're spending versus what you know as to how much other clients are spending for similar services. And that will give you a sense of, well, is this campaign profitable? Is this campaign really making sense? And that's the other element of it, of course. You can compare this with other campaigns. So this is a way to identify if it's outside of the agreed scope of work, but to be honest with you, identify whether you should entertain doing it. So making a judgment call. If it's a client where there's problems and you think it might help and it's not onerous, then we should do it. If it's something the operations team say is a lot of additional work, you should think about doing it. Understanding the profitability of the campaign and comparing it with other campaigns is also important. And then asking someone with more experience and senior to you is also a useful strategy that you can take up. So let's just say you've gone through all of these steps. Now you've discovered that it is outside of the agreed statement of work and that it's ultimately a lot of work. So what I would say really is just this is so where the campaign is going well or the campaign is when the campaign's not going well, it changes the nature of the game a little bit. Okay, when a campaign's not going well, then and the reason it's not going well is in relation to the work you've delivered, then you might step this into the unhappy client bucket and look at different judgments that you can bestow uh, in terms of how to deal with it. Whether work is going reasonably or it's going okay or it's not going well because of issues from the client side, then to a decent degree, the client should be reasonable in understanding. And outlining this as a lot of new work would be a case of just really saying to them, this is for, and it could be as simple as a couple of sentences. I don't think if it's self-evident, there needs to be a huge rationale behind it. If it isn't self-evident, then there needs to be further explanation behind it. So good examples of, things the client can understand. If they ask you to do, X more research reports, that'll take you a long time. If they ask you to change like a simple widget on the website, but it's actually quite complex, then that needs to be explained as to why it's complex. And as long as the client has an understanding of it, a client should be reasonable enough in recognizing that, okay, this is a lot of additional work. So what is the fee? What is the cost? Now that's a conversation that the business development manager, the sales director can have with them. But again, depending upon what you know about the prices of the campaigns, it might be something that you can take up with them directly. So again, I would revert back to number 5 as to what to do in that element. But outlining this as a client should be reasonable, provided you demonstrate why it's a lot of new work, where it isn't self-evident, okay? Where it isn't self-evident. So that's the other thing. Then if a client still says no, or still says, well, I think you should do this, then again, I would revert back to number 5. But if the consensus is still that, well, we can't, you'd politely say we need to adjust the scope and billing to continue, or otherwise you can work out some kind of quid pro close. So that's a takeaway close. So what I mean by 7 is if a client still says no and it's clearly outside the agreed scope of work, then you can entertain politely telling them that, look, Mr. Client or Miss Client, we need to adjust the scope and billing to continue. I hope you can appreciate where we're coming from. For the moment, we'll pause just until you come back to us. So you can do that. We're going to need to pause. Just look, let us know what you want to do. Now, saying that on a call is quite tricky, but if you role play it, then it's fine. So that's something that you can practice with role play. Just look, I'm sorry we can't continue. I'm sorry we've stopped just now. Just let us know what you'd like to do. And the other way that could be reasonable is a takeaway close, meaning that where you can take away some other elements of the work to account for this new work. Okay, so that's something that you could either discuss with the client or you could determine to change yourselves internally, depending upon how much your client understands as well as knows about the delivery, that you could choose to minimize some of the work done in other places. So you could look at start playing with that element of the campaign and say, look, well, why don't we not do this so we can afford to do that? And that could work for ultimately a client. The takeaway close, or swapping deliverables, which is really what we're talking about here. Now, between those 3 strategies, once we've gone through steps 1 to 5, and between steps 1 to 5, you might be able to make some concessions and get this work done. But if it becomes more difficult, then you'd move to 6, 7, and 8 as potential options. And then ultimately, if you're still not sure, you just go back to defer this to someone else in the team to discuss, e.g. sales. So then you could, for example, number 9 would be having the guy who sold the campaign, the guy or the gal who sold the campaign, come in to discuss it with the client, where you've already gone through options 1 to 8 already, and for whatever reason isn't working. Then you can defer to 9. So there you have it. This is how to deal with clients asking for work outside of the agreed scope of